Welcome to Day de la Tarda Partyline Talkshow. I'm your host, Luann Stacy, and today on the talk show will be I have a special guest. I have the Chief Kahsennenhawe Sky-Deer, and we're going to talk a little bit about the recent decision regarding a Quebec court decision on membership law, and then you have some other updates. And I guess my first question to you, what were your thoughts or what's your ideas on about this ruling now that you've had a little bit of time to absorb what was being said?
Yeah, so on Monday, when I guess it was being broadcast to the community on K103 that the decision was in and that we lost, I guess was the quote unquote
that
big
was the
overriding
big one. Yes,
sentiment that everybody heard, and people got reactionary. What does this mean? And for me and my position, as a leader, you just got to stay calm, cool, and collected, because at that point I didn't even know what the judgment said in its entirety. I hadn't had a chance to review the document. And then in speaking to Winona Polson-Lahash, our chief political advisor, later on that evening, she said, it's not the best, but it's not the worst either. And really, they were silent on the whole residency aspect. So to me, the overriding thing that I need the community to be aware of, and that's why I felt it was important for me to come on the air today, although, we've heard from former Grand Chief Mike DeLille, Joe Norton, you've heard from Wanique, and myself as the portfolio chief. I wanted to come and I guess assure the community about next steps and what this could mean and where we're going. And that the main thing for me is that it does not mean that non-natives will be permitted to live in the territory of Kahnawake. It was very silent on the matter of residency.
Yes.
Which we know that was problematic with the law in its former state. The membership law encompassed everything. It encompassed membership, residency. It was all jumbled into one.
Yeah.
And therefore, when we were going through the CDMP process, we proposed to the community, look, we need to separate these two because they're so fundamentally different in their application and what they mean. And we know that membership pertains to who in the community is entitled and eligible for benefits and services because they meet a certain criteria. Non-Indigenous people wouldn't be eligible under the membership law regardless. So that's why I'm saying with the whole thing being like a frigaze, it didn't make sense. And I think that's why a lot of people got confused. So let's make that clear. The judgment does not mean non-natives will be permitted to live here. Basically, what they were saying is that it infringes on the rights of a person to choose their spouse or, if they want to be with a non-Indigenous person, because the way the law was set up, you get suspended.
Yes.
That's the part where I think is problematic. And I can understand where the community was coming from. We always talk about the history and the way things were happening in this community with the Indian Act,
and
how Native women were losing their rights and non-Native women were acquiring their rights. So the membership law was basically an exercise of our collective will as a community to say, we're going to even out the playing field. And from now on, anybody who marries out is going to lose something, right? So with regard to the next steps in the law, because we're already going through this review and amendment process anyways, there might be a requirement on our part to change the language, but we will keep the position and the sentiment of this community for the long run.
So I guess one of the questions I had, does this decision impact any of the work that you've been working on? The work on membership, does it, with the work with the Iroquois caucus, does it impact any of that? Because you've been working on that for quite a while, and we've talked about the urgency of the issue of membership. Does that change anything? Does it enhance anything? Does it,
For us, it's like, I think Joe even said the term business as usual. We're still going through the amendments. It doesn't mean, the judgment doesn't mean that the law is struck down and it's got to start from ground zero. All that work and the whole, foundation of the law and all the work that we've done, no, it doesn't change anything. It may have to change a little bit of the language that's in the law. But other than that, like I said, the position and the principle of what the membership law is intended to do is going to maintain. And that for me is that And because we changed, don't forget, it's not called the membership law anymore because it's not this club.
No.
The terminology of membership comes from the Indian Act. And that's not our way. If we're going to recognize who our people are, and we know that it's by extension of our families, our clan families, and because we've been in this community, our ancestors are from here, those are the things you need to take into account. Language and culture, so paramount in the way we're going to be moving forward, in that was what the whole premise of the law was intended to protect.
Yes.
Right? As Ungwe people, we have a responsibility to ensure that the 7 generations, the faces yet to come, it's a part of our principle that they're going to have the same benefits and rights that we do.
Yeah.
And I think what we were seeing is because of all of this outside meddling in our affairs is still happening today as a result of, the federal government and Indian Act and all of these bills that have been passed over the years. Kahnawake needs to stand strong and firm in our position of the reason why we do these things. It's not to be discriminatory. It's not to be racist, but it's about the preservation of our collective identity as a Ganyagahaga of Kahnawake, and that we ensure the things that are in our circle, our language, our culture, our ceremonies, all of those things are protected, and that those are the things we ensure for the future generations.
I thought it was interesting in one or two of the sections, they even mentioned the fact that it was our responsibility to set criteria. It was our responsibility, which was interesting.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. I don't know. I never heard of a court decision that would say that. So to me, I took that as a positive.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah, it said that the judgment is not going to resolve the internal conflict over membership, because the members of the community have said themselves, the resolution of this is ultimately the task for our people to decide, not an outside court. No. And that's why, for me, and if people read the judgment, I said, no self-respecting Mohawk would ever bring this to an outside court to say, let's let the, great white father decide for us how to govern our affairs and our territory. It's just contrary to what we believe in, and that this should have been settled internally in our community decision-making process, because that's where the voice of the people and the collective lies.
Yes.
And now it boils into this whole collective versus individual rights, and what trumps what. I understand people have to have choice and freedom to decide, but with those choices comes consequences, and that's the way the community had set up this law to be that way.
And I thought the other interesting point was the discussion on convening a council of elders, which was originally in the original membership law. Right. And seemed to have been a sticking point somewhere or change along the way.
Yeah, and just to make the community clear, through the community decision-making process, the Elders Council has pretty much been disbanded.
Yes.
The first order of business when we went to CDMP was, number one, the only way the membership law could have been amended was through the Council of Elders.
Yeah.
The community said, no, we've now developed this process called community decision-making process, and this is the only way we're going to change laws in the territory. So that part was accepted by everybody in attendance. The second order of business was, okay, so now there's this Council of Elders that has a lifetime appointment to decide on membership application. The community said, no more. We don't want to go down that road again where people have a chip on their shoulder or, a axe to grind with certain individuals because of things that happened in the past.
Absolutely.
That we want a non-biased person to look at the application for what it is, and if they meet the criteria, then they're going to get it. They won't be, questioned about, who are they sleeping with and what's their intentions and all this stuff that we know happened. Yeah. There's a whole ODS report on what was happening with the Council of Elders and why we suspended them in 2007. Yeah. It's just unfortunate that it's taken us this long, and it's not because the CDMP process is a bad process. Yeah. I mean, we've made amendments to it over time to make it more functional and that it goes a lot quicker. Look at the election law this January passed in a matter of 2-3 months. It's because this law has such fundamental implications for the community.
So many things, right?
Exactly. So it really needs the time, energy, and effort to look at what it is that we're doing and why.
Yeah.
So I think the work continues. We were supposed to have a CDMP meeting this past Tuesday.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I couldn't be there. The coordinator, Leslie Sky, Ron Sky, who's also one of the key facilitators. Yeah, the lawsuit, I'm sure, had some semblance of an impact, but overall, the key people weren't there. So we said, let's just defer it. And not only that, everybody was mad.
Yes.
How do you come in to make decisions when your
Not in
mind
a good
is
way, yeah.
Exactly. And we need to make sure that, we take into account those principles of looking out for the future generations, that we're not coming in there with malice or ill intent to try to hurt people, because that's not our way either,
No.
So I think moving forward, we just need to find some middle ground. I know there's a lot of community members out there that are very upset right now. And for me, all I can say is a message is that, cooler heads are going to prevail, that, this isn't the end of the world. The sky is not falling.
No.
And as a community, when we're faced with a crisis or a matter on our hands that we're not happy with, we find a way to come together and find a better way forward.
So it's possible that this might motivate the community to get involved in the membership meetings, in the next meeting, the spring community meeting, which this is on the agenda next week. Maybe this will push people to become involved so that it can get resolved.
Yes.
Because that was my next question. What do we do next as a community? What are the things that we need to do?
Mm-hmm. And we just had a long session this morning, chief and counsel with the legal team, like going through the whole entire judgment. What does this mean? What are the next steps? So I'm sure as of Monday, because that's our official council meeting, everybody needs to still consume and digest and come up with a decision that, we could all live with, of how we proceed from here. And like I said, because it's not the end of the world kind of thing that happened, it's a very historic moment in our history as the Kanien'kehá:ka of Kahnawake, and where we go from here. And like you said, there's a lot of complacency in this community.
Yes.
A lot of people don't engage. It doesn't affect me or whatever. But when it does affect them, that's when you're going to see. And this law, and not only this, I've talked about S3
yes.
and the things that are coming, and about, our divisions in this community of elected and traditional, because everybody in this community is going to have a say on how we move forward.
Yeah.
So like you said, engagement, coming out to meetings, getting the right information is paramount, because like I said, a lot of people just heard we lost the court case and now all hell's breaking loose and let's get the
It was wild.
And
It was wild.
talking about fires and that's not the time. I understand when people get mad, we tend to get reactionary.
Yes.
But there's a time to let the information soak and get the proper and correct information and really understand what it means and how we can move forward.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking forward to.
You also wanted to touch on some of the things that happened at the AFN Special Chiefs Assembly, or not really?
Well, I mean, what was really important, I thought, is that we continue to hammer home this message about Canada meddling in our affairs. We know that as nations, and if we're going to use that term nation, we know that Kahnawake is not the nation, that there's other sister communities, and that, we might not be doing the kind of work in a collective framework to say, here's a position on behalf of the Kanien'kehá:ka people.
Yeah.
And with regard to this whole citizenship, membership, Indian registration and all that, that's one component where I think it will be very important for us to take some strong stances, because looking at the reasons why the membership law or the Kanien'kehá:ka of Kahnawake law is the way it is that there's a lot of people taking traditional concepts and putting it into this kind of law, about, like, let's say if a person has a child with a non-Indigenous person and then they become Asana Ungwehunwe, or if you want to say Sa'Deyenagwasiha, that they have a responsibility to marry back in to the circle.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if they choose outward again, then they've kind of lost that child loses their voice and their connectivity to the people. We have to look at what are the differences and the distinctions between these mechanisms that are impacting our people, and the leadership need to decide, well, then how does citizenship and being a citizen under the Confederacy or the Haudenosaunee, and that's not our realm as the MCK to figure that out. But we're not very clear on what that process is. Now, with regard to the membership law or the Ganyagahaga of Kahnawake law, the community has over time, and it's been hundreds of years. I was reading a book recently called the Gervais Macumber and his 26 children. We were fighting against the non-natives living in this territory even in the 1800s. And I'm sure it was happening before that with the seigneury and whatever. So this concept is not anything new.
No.
And I think that, the community, as we move forward, are going to have a lot of hard dialogue, if you want to call it. It's like the elephant in the room that we don't really address about our governance and where we need to go and who should have a voice and all of that. That there's a lot of things that are happening right now on a broader scale that that the community doesn't know about. And it's about trying to rectify those relationships between all of our people, because we've been divided for so long because of Indian Act.
Hundreds of years.
Yeah. And like you said, non-natives living in our community who don't know the philosophies and the thinking about, because we're so different, right?
Absolutely.
When we talk about the indigenous lens and a Eurocentric lens, the way we operate. And for us, it was very concerning that when people choose a non-indigenous spouse, that they go with them to where they come from, so that they don't bring their laws, their government, their mind, and their mentality into our house, because in doing that, now it creates dissension. And how come I can't run for council? Well, how come I can't vote? How come I can't own land?
Yeah.
So right away, there's like this, I don't know how you would call it, but a separation of entitlement.
Okay.
And that doesn't bode well for, the European people, because for them, it was like, well, that's our right.
Yeah.
And now look at what you have. A judgment from an outside court telling us that the way you're operating and choosing to, we'll use the word discrimination. Discriminate against your own people because of their choice to have a non-indigenous spouse is not right.
Yeah.
And we said, well, there's a reason for that. They're different. Their mindset is different. But if they want to come into our house, well, then let's talk about their responsibility. Are they going to learn our language? Are they going to learn our culture? Is that what they're going to teach to their children? Are they not going to try to own up all the land and whatever? Because we knew historically that was what their conquest was all about. They wanted to own up all the land, because what you see with land is resources and money, and what could I get from, and about this hierarchy of status.
Yeah.
So I don't know. As we move forward, for me, all I could see is the fact that our community, we have a clear opportunity right now to mobilize and come together and make some decisions for ourselves. But first of all, we all need to be educated on the issues. And as Mohawk Council of Kahnawake, that has been our responsibility in trying to make people aware. I mean, we created a residency website specifically, has all these historical vignettes. It talks about all of the things that have happened over the last, I'll say, since 2014. There was a big movement again, or a big flare up with regard to this membership issue.
Because it seems to flare up. It's got a cycle or so, where it becomes, and usually that's brought on by outside government making changes.
Yeah.
Not necessarily internal. And I think internally, we haven't spoken about it. We don't speak. I think you talked about the elephant in the room. And at some point in time, whether you agree with what's being proposed or not, people need to voice their opinions.
Yep. So a community meeting coming up on Tuesday, to which I will not be present. Unfortunately, I had scheduled some time away. But what I think will be important is that the council conveys to the community about how we're going to address this judgment, and to just keep assuring people that, we've already started to take the measures of separating residency and membership law. We've already put in the framework to develop our own justice system in the community. So, what's good for our people, we find a way to make sure that it happens, because there's principles that we have in the way we're trying to govern ourselves, because that's our right.
Yeah.
Everybody, even at the AFN, was touting, UNDRIP, United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Well, we have the right to determine who our members are, who our citizens are. We have the right to govern ourselves the way we feel. So, this judgment to me is, again, imposition by a foreign entity telling us how to govern our affairs.
Yeah.
And I think our people are just going to say, you know what? The hell with it.
Yeah.
But as leaders, we have a responsibility to say, okay, well, we can take that kind of position and decision. Here could be the ramifications. Are we willing to live with that? And here is what, we could potentially propose as solutions, because I already feel like they're being worked on.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Anything else before...
No, but I think just as to reiterate the sentiments of our Grand Chief, that now is the time for people to get involved.
Yeah.
To have a voice, to have a say. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of meetings in the next little while with regard to this. CDMP is the place where we give the community the voice to have direction in the laws of this community. So as I mentioned, as the portfolio chief on membership, I assure you the work will continue. And again, I just hope it mobilizes our community to get involved and to ensure that we stay on track of where our elders and our ancestors told us is our responsibility as the Ganyagahag of Kahnawake.
And the community meeting is on Tuesday.
Tuesday night, May 8th, Golden Age Club, 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Nyawagoa.